Okay, you can, come forward if you choose. My name's Randy Liu. I'm currently Far West Treasurer and a past president. This session is Avalanche Safety and Mountain Rescue. As you've probably been reading in papers for the last few years, there are more and more avalanche deaths. More and more people are skiing side country and back country, not aware of the actual dangers. With us today, Paige Bauer and Steve Rollins from Portland Mountain Rescue, and I will let them proceed.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for having us. So my name is Paige Walker, and this is Steve Rollins. We are both rescue leaders with Portland Mountain Rescue, and today we're going to be talking about avalanche safety and mountain rescue. Am I loud enough?
No.
No.
You will be soon.
I will be soon. How's that? Is that loud enough? So first of all, let me introduce myself and talk a little bit about me and what my qualifications are. So my name is Paige Walker. In real life, my day job is I'm a professor of biology at Pacific University in Forest Grove, Oregon, which is about 45 minutes west of here, kind of closer to the coastal range. I teach biology there. My PhD is in cancer biology. I do cancer research with my undergraduate students, and I also teach molecular genetics and anatomy and physiology. I'm also an instructor with the Outdoor Pursuits there, which is our outdoor program. I teach classes in rock climbing, mountaineering, and avalanche safety, and I've been at Pacific since about 2008. I joined PMR in 2018, so I'm relatively new, only 4 years. My roles there, I'm a rescue leader, a public information officer, and just recently I am now chair of the training committee. This year I completed my first professional season with the Northwest Avalanche Center, or NWAC. And for them, what I did this past season was I worked as a professional observer and avalanche awareness instructor. So what I would do as a professional observer is I'd go up to the mountain once a week and I would dig snow pits. I'd go as far back into the backcountry as I could to make professional observations, collect data, and then I would submit a formal report to the NWAC forecasters in order for them to be able to generate an accurate forecast. So that's me. Steve, if you want to, this is just the things that I knew about Steve when I made this slide. So if you want to talk a little bit about yourself.
Oh,
Drive a Subaru.
So we're all the cool guys drive Subaru.
Absolutely.
Of course. And Outback. I've been doing mountain rescue for 26 years. I'm a rescue leader. So when they asked us to present, we said, well, we'll do half avalanche, and then I'll tell some rescue stories that people are love to hear rescue stories, and we'll do some interesting safety lessons from that too. So you hear a little bit more about that, about my history in that. So I'm going to hand it over to Paige because she's got some great stuff for you.
Yeah, so I'm going to do the boring half, and he's going to do the exciting half. So the way that we structured this talk is I'm going to start out with an introduction to PMR, who we are, what we do, and then Steve's going to go into more detail with kind of like some of the nitty-gritty about what happens on different missions that we go on. I'm then going to explain the role of avalanche safety and mountain rescue and how that can apply to folks venturing into the side country or the back country. I'm then going to talk a little bit about avalanche statistics and follow that with the more technical aspects of avalanches, like what causes avalanches, what to do if you're caught in an avalanche, how to mitigate risk, and then I have a slide with resources if you're interested in further avalanche education. And then I'll turn the microphone over to Steve and we'll have story time. So Portland Mountain Rescue, or PMR as we call it, we are a volunteer nonprofit 501c3 search and rescue organization, meaning that none of us get paid for what we do, nor do we charge anyone for our services. And so whatever we're doing, whether we're on the mountain rescuing folks or doing public education events like this, we don't get paid, and we do it because we love doing it, because we love spreading our message, not because there's a paycheck at the end. We specialize in high angle and alpine mountain rescue, meaning that most of the rescues that we do take place in the alpine meaning above tree line. And here in the Pacific Northwest, once you get above tree line, you start running into glaciers, glaciated terrain, which has its own set of hazards, including avalanches, crevasses, more objective hazards, falling ice and rock. So that's where we do the majority of our rescues because we are a mountain rescue unit. We are also qualified and trained in high angle rock rescues. So like if you're walking along a trail and you fall off a cliff, we have the expertise to rig up rescue rope systems to go and get to you and evacuate you safely to an ambulance. We are accredited by the Mountain Rescue Association of North America, or the MRA. This is their logo somewhere on me here, right here. The Mountain Rescue Association was actually founded in 1959 of a timberline lodge. So this area, Oregon in general, is very rich in mountain rescue history. It consists of about 90 mountain rescue units throughout the United States and Canada. And they accredit us, and they're our governing body. So every couple of years, we have to go basically present our skills to the MRA, and they check off whether we pass or not. So they're our accrediting governing body. As Portland Mountain Rescue, we operate under the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. So here in the state of Oregon, all search and rescue operations are organized and executed by county sheriff's offices. So like if there's a search and rescue operation that needs to take place in downtown Portland, that's actually the jurisdiction of the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and not the Portland Police Department. So we, as Portland Mountain Rescue, we operate under the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office because Clackamas County is where half of Mount Hood is located, the western and the southern sides of Mount Hood. Clackamas County is actually quite a large county, and it includes a lot of area that's below tree line, rough, remote terrain, and so we get called on missions below tree line there as well. We have in Portland Mountain Rescue both field deployable and associate members, which are non-field deployable. Our field deployable members are obviously the ones that go into the field when a rescue call is made. And we have 3 tiers of field deployables. There are rescue level leaders like Steve and I, and we actually lead the teams in the field. We have support members, and then we have trainees. We also have associate members, and they are, even though they're not field deployable, they are essential to running our organization. They do a lot of organizational work, fundraising, public outreach, and so we actually couldn't operate without them. I have our mission statement here at the bottom, saving lives through rescue and mountain safety education. And even though the rescues are what we all love to do, I love going on missions, I love helping people, and I love going to the backcountry to do those things, rescue is only 50% of our mission. The other 50% is mountain safety education, which is why we do outreach events like this. We have a volcano safety series that we do in conjunction with the Portland Mountain Shop every season when in the spring people start climbing and skiing the Cascade volcanoes. We also we do a number of outreach events with the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts, different high schools, and most recently we have a podcast called Rescue Radio, and it's super cool if you want to check that out. So this is Mount Hood. Has anyone seen it in the past couple of days?
Yeah.
Oh, did it come out for a little while at least? A little bit?
Yeah, it's like, oh, there it was.
Yeah, that's what they say. Like, if you don't like the weather, like, just wait 5 minutes, right? Or here comes the sun, look quick. So this is what Mount Hood looks like from Portland, in case you haven't seen it. It's a beautiful mountain. From Portland, you're looking at the west side. And I just wanted to orient you a little bit to some of the features of what you're looking at. So this prominent ridge in the middle here, this is called Yokum Ridge. It is a climbing route. It's one of the more hazardous and challenging climbing routes. We do rescue people off this ridge, but most of the time it's because people are climbing something else and accidentally get onto this ridge. It's quite challenging, and it does not see that many ascents. The left skyline here, this is a ridge called Cathedral Ridge. And in between Cathedral Ridge and Yokum Ridge is the Sandy Glacier. And the steep part above the Sandy Glacier is the Sandy Head Wall. We do rescues from this part of the mountain, not as many as the south side, but this is in our territory. This ridge here is called Illumination Ridge, and it terminates at a prominent rock feature called Illumination Rock. In between Yokum and Illumination Ridge, there's the Reed Glacier, and then above the Reed Glacier, there's the steep Reed Head Wall. There are a number of climbing routes that are relatively popular on the Reed Head Wall, and so this is probably the second most popular area that we rescue folks off of. It's got high objective danger, the routes are not easy, and folks can get themselves into trouble pretty quickly, especially if they don't know what they're doing. So this is the west side here, and again, this is in Clackamas County, so whenever someone gets injured or needs a rescue or calls for help, we respond to missions on this side. Our most popular area, however, is the south side, and the south side route is this one here.
Is that where the Palmer chairlift is?
That's exactly where the Palmer chairlift is, right? So the south side route starts at Timberline Lodge, and the first 2,500 vertical feet is you're just walking along the ski resort. And the ski resort terminates, I think, right around in here. And from there, it's really just a walk up into the crater. And so people get the impression that these routes are easy, but once you get up into the crater, they get quite technical quite fast. These are the most popular climbing routes. We call them collectively the Southside routes because they are so accessible. And people, I think, are under the impression that they're not that technical, and then they get up there and realize that they are technical and there's a lot of hazards. And so this is where we do the majority of our missions, is on the south side. If you look at this environment here, right, it's steep, it's snowy, which means that avalanche hazard is quite real. As mountain rescuers, we have to deal with avalanches all the time in our rescue work, as well as our recreational work. These are some pictures of avalanches that I have seen on popular climbing routes. This picture here I took in April of 2022. These are avalanches that are coming off the Reed head wall, which is on the west side of the mountain. And you can see there's some avalanche crowns here, some avalanche debris, and they have come off the steeper parts of the wall. And so if I look at something like this, I would recommend that people not be climbing, because it indicates to me that the snow is unstable and that area is quite dangerous. And this area is actually quite notorious for avalanching like this. This picture here I actually pulled off of social media a couple of weeks ago, and this avalanche, you can see the crowns here and here. These crowns were probably 2 feet tall, so it was a pretty big avalanche. And this was taken on the south side a couple of weeks ago. These types of avalanches, which we call slab avalanches, are quite unusual this time of year, this late into June. These are avalanches that we more typically see in the winter season. I don't know if you have been keeping track of what's been happening in the Pacific Northwest the past 2 or 3 months, but we have been getting unprecedented precipitation. I mean, the Columbia out there is almost at flood stage, right? So we've been getting a lot of rain. Above 6,000 or 7,000 feet, that rain means snow. And so generally, this time of year, our snowpack starts to settle out and the avalanche danger starts to decrease. But that's actually not what we're seeing at all right now, because there's so much precipitation. And so it's important to be aware, right, of these avalanche risks whenever you go into the backcountry. There are a couple of reasons that avalanches are important when we think about mountain rescue. As mountain rescuers, we need to be able to accurately assess avalanche risk and be able to mitigate that risk for our own safety. When we go into the field, our safety is actually our priority, right? Because that's just the way it has to be. The first reason that avalanches are important in mountain rescue is that people can get caught, injured, and killed in avalanches. And so if there is an avalanche accident where someone is injured, we get called and we have to go into the scene, package that patient, and evacuate them, especially if they're injured. This picture on your left is another picture of an avalanche from the Reed head wall. This is a specific area. It's a very narrow gully called Loophole Couloir, which is actually quite a famous avalanche funnel. It's quite steep, it's very narrow, and it gets very wind-loaded with snow, which is a perfect recipe for pretty nasty avalanches. This picture was taken from a mission in May of 2020. I don't know if you all remember what was happening in May of 2020. It was, I don't want to bring anything up that might terrorize you again, right? But this was 2 months after the big shutdowns happened, and here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of trailheads were closed. The south side of Mount Hood was closed. The U.S. Forest Service didn't want people recreating in the environment, mainly because they didn't want to have to drag us out because we were all being encouraged to stay at home. So, bad memories, right? Well, Memorial Day weekend of 2020 comes and the mountain is open again. And not only that, the weekend is predicted to be sunny and beautiful. Unfortunately, the 2 or 3 days before that, we got just nuked with snow and winds on the high mountains. So if you know anything about avalanches, when you have high snow and high winds, that's a recipe for avalanche danger. But everybody was just so stoked to get out, right, because we've been cooped up in our houses for 2 months, that there was just an enormous amount of people on the mountain. And this was not the only mission we had this weekend. Steve and I were actually on the other mission that had happened the day before this up on Mount Hood. But in any case, there was a couple that was climbing this couloir, which is a steep snow gully, which is super fun. I like the route very much. But one of them at the top, past this constriction, triggered an avalanche. And they were carried all the way through this funnel. At least, I don't know, it was probably about 1,000 feet, would be my guess. And they were spit out at the bottom. There was relatively minor injuries, but 911 was called. And so our team had to go in, package the patient, and then evacuate them down to a waiting ambulance in the parking lot. All right, so avalanche danger is real, and it does happen. The other reason that avalanches and our ability to understand and mitigate avalanche risk is important for the work that we do is that sometimes our subjects might not necessarily be in avalanche terrain or might not have gotten caught in an avalanche, but we have to navigate through pretty scary avalanche terrain to go get them. This was the mission the day before the one I just showed, same weekend, Memorial Day weekend, May of 2020, and Steve and I are both on this mission. If you don't know much about the south route of Mount Hood, which I don't expect you would, this is a map here. I took this off of a website called CalTopo, and I love this website because it has a feature called slope shading, and anywhere the slopes are shaded, that indicates avalanche terrain. So these are really useful for us because we're like, oh, if we have to go down into Zigzag Canyon, we have to be prepared to deal with avalanches.
What was that saying?
CalTopo, C-A-L-T-O-P-O. It's a great website. There's also a sister site called SARTopo, which is the one we use for search and rescue. So the south route starts here, so this is Timberline Lodge. And it goes up this pretty mellow snow slope to the top of the Palmer Chairlift, which is still just out of bounds of the resort. And then you keep marching up this relatively mellow snow slope, and then you kind of hang a right into the crater. And this is where everything starts getting steep, right near the summit. Well, what happens, a common thing that happens to climbers, especially during whiteouts, is they get disoriented. And instead of coming down into the crater and then hanging a relatively sharp left to go straight south, back to the lodge, they take the fall line here. If you've ever been in a whiteout, and I know all of you ski, so sometimes you're skiing along and all of a sudden you can't see anything. You can't even really tell if you're on something that's sloping or like, you're like, what's happening, right? It's called a ping pong ball. And that's what happens to a lot of folks. And so they take the fall line, which is the easiest way down. But if you see, you take the fall line, you end up in this huge canyon here that's all avalanche terrain. So this one mission, he was a snowboarder, got to the top, and he just snowboarded down the fall line in a whiteout, and it ended up pretty deep into this canyon. And so we got called, and not only did we have to navigate this avalanche terrain in what was probably high avalanche danger, we had to do it in the middle of the night, in a whiteout, right, and like, it was dark. So it was a pretty exciting mission. It has a happy ending. This is us, we packaged him and we were dragging him out of the Zigzag Canyon. I was on the mountain for 17 hours that day, so that was pretty exciting for me, but has a happy ending. If you're interested in more details about this particular mission, the subject, Nick Larson, and I sat down for the first podcast of Rescue Radio and talked about it. And he is very open about talking about his experiences. So I recommend, if you're interested, it was quite an exciting mission. So, that being said, avalanches, dangerous avalanches, don't only take place in the backcountry, high on the mountain, far away from people. There are fatal avalanches that also happen inbounds at ski resorts, as well as what we call the side country. So, side country is really any area that's outside, I consider it to be any area that's outside a rope that a ski patroller has put up that doesn't want you to cross. A lot of folks these days, especially, they want to get fresh tracks, right? And so they'll see, like, if they just duck this rope off to the side, if they just go a little bit of ways out of bounds and ski, then they can duck the rope back and get on the lift and ski up and take a lift up. The issue with that is side country is not mitigated for avalanches, right? So that's one issue. The other issue is that ski patrollers aren't trained to go into areas like that. And so even if you're just like a couple hundred feet sometimes out of bounds and you get injured, we get called instead of the ski patrollers. And if that happens, it takes us a couple of hours because we're not on the mountain generally, or if we are, we're in a different place on the mountain. And so you're making some risks. They're taking some risks by venturing into the side country, which might seem safe. An example of this was here on the left. This is a picture that I took off an NWAC report. So NWAC is the Northwest Avalanche Center. And the Northwest Avalanche Center is part of the U.S. Forest Service. And whenever there's an avalanche fatality in the Pacific Northwest, they generate a formal report. And these reports are publicly available. You can find them on the NWAC website or any website that keeps track of avalanche statistics. This was early December in Silver Basin, which is Crystal Mountain Resort area. I've never skied there, but I'm sure a number of you have. I hear it's a spectacular resort. This was a part of the mountain here, Silver Basin, which was closed at the time. Again, I don't know if y'all remember what happened back in December, but there was no snow, and then we just got this like nuking storm for like 2 weeks, and it was some of the best powder I've skied in the Pacific Northwest in a long time. But a lot of the ski resorts were still closed, or they still had large areas of their resorts that were closed because they just weren't ready to open yet. This was a closed area here. And in early December, there was a group of 6 skiers that were skinning up this basin to prepare to ski it. One of them triggered an avalanche. And my memory is that 5 of them were caught, 3 of them were fully buried, and 1 of them was killed. So that was unfortunate. This was the first avalanche fatality of this season, and it happened in the Pacific Northwest. So side country and areas of resorts that are closed can be dangerous. There are also inbounds avalanches that kill people. These are rare. In the past 10 years, there have only been 10 inbounds avalanche fatalities. This was an incident that happened in April of 2022. Again, this is the official NWAC report. These are pictures from the official NWAC report. This fatality happened at Mount Hood Meadows, which is a ski resort on the southeast side of Mount Hood. I love the resort, super fun, great terrain. Some of the terrain is quite advanced. So a snowboarder went missing, and he was missing for 4 days, and they called out the cavalry. They had about 5 or 6 different search and rescue organizations looking for this person. I don't know if you read about it in the news. It was covered quite a bit in the news. And 4 days later, actually the ski patrollers, the Mount Hood Meadows ski patrollers, found him buried in a creek at the bottom of this run called Patty Cakes, which was in one of the more advanced areas of the ski resort. And it's not actually clear what happened. He did die of a snow immersion injury, which is basically asphyxiation. But it's thought that when he came down this run here, he triggered an avalanche, a small one, but large enough to force him into this open creek here and bury him. So again, it's not only way far out in the back country that you have to be concerned about avalanche risk, it's also side country and inbounds as well. So I did want to talk about avalanche statistics because just because you go skiing at a resort, just because you go skiing outside a resort doesn't mean you're going to get killed in an avalanche, right? These are statistics that are kept by the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, or the CAIC. They are the body that keeps track of pretty much all avalanche statistics. On this graph here on the x-axis is the year in which the statistic was taken, and they have been keeping statistics since 1951. And then on the y-axis here are the number of fatalities. The gray bars are annual fatalities, so the number of people that are actually killed, and then the red line is a 5-year average. So you can see the general trend, especially since the early 90s, is upward. We had a couple of really low snow years, so that probably accounts for these low numbers here. But then last season, the 2021 season, was the most deadliest avalanche fatality season on record, with 37 folks that were killed. This year, that number is at 17, so that's actually quite a lower number than we've seen in the past. But again, if you go out to the backcountry, chances are you're probably not going to get killed in an avalanche. The statistics are hard to find for backcountry skiers and backcountry recreators because there's no lift ticket we have to buy, right? And so the estimates that I've read are estimates from gear purchase, right? Because that's really the only way you can get at these numbers. And the estimates are that about 10% of all skiers are backcountry skiers. So you're looking at about 1 million backcountry skiers across the United States. And if you add snowmobilers, sledders, climbers, whatever, snowshoers, whatever else people do to recreate in the backcountry, that number is probably around 2 million. And so 37 deaths out of 2 million recreators isn't a large percentage, but it's not zero, right? And so one of the things that we really advocate for is to get formal avalanche education so you can make smarter decisions, even in the side country, inbounds as well as the back country. This one I thought is interesting. It breaks up avalanche fatalities by activity. So on the x-axis here are fatality numbers, and on the y-axis is category of user. And these are just over the past 10 years. 84 backcountry tours have been killed, so that's the largest number, probably because that's the largest user group. 78 snowmobilers, and I would actually argue that snowmobiling is more dangerous than touring because there are fewer snowmobilers. Followed by side country riders, 28 side country riders have been killed in avalanches. Climbers, inbound riders, 10. So again, that risk is not zero. And then you have hikers, mechanized guides, snow bikers, that's a thing now. People go out with those huge fat tires and bike around in the snow. Ski patrollers, human-powered guide clients, and highway personnel. So before I go further and talk about what causes avalanches, I want to just touch base about some basic definitions so we're all kind of talking about the same thing. The first term I would like to define is what is backcountry. And backcountry in my mind and in the avalanche safety world is anywhere avalanche danger is not mitigated. And this includes wilderness areas, areas outside ski boundaries, side country areas, and closed areas of resorts. Right, so anywhere avalanche danger is not mitigated, formally mitigated. The other thing is, what is an avalanche? So we all have an idea of what an avalanche is. I'm sure we've all seen like Vertical Limit, all those movies, right, where these giant avalanches come, like take out whole towns and stuff. So an avalanche, very basically speaking, is a mass of snow that slides downhill. There are different types of avalanches. The one pictured here, there are actual giant chunks of cohesive snow that break apart and slide. Excuse me. Those are called slab avalanches. There are loose avalanches, which are less consolidated kind of avalanches. Both are dangerous. There are very big avalanches, right? There are very small avalanches. There are very destructive avalanches, avalanches that can take out entire towns, especially in areas of huge mountains like in the Himalayas and the Karakoram, areas like that. And they're also really not destructive avalanches, avalanches that wouldn't even like move you off your feet if you got caught in them. Right, so there's a wide variety of avalanches. And being able to recognize what kind of avalanche is going to take place where, it takes years, decades of experience to be able to forecast those types of things. But generally speaking, an avalanche is a mass of snow that slides downhill. What causes avalanches? There are 3 legs of the avalanche equilateral triangle. All 3 of these must be present in order for an avalanche to occur. You must be in avalanche terrain. The snow must be unstable, and there must be a trigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each one of these individually. And I do want to say this. This is in no way like an avalanche education course. I will give you some resources at the end in case you are more interested in learning avalanche and avalanche safety. This is just a very basic introduction to snow science. So avalanche terrain, right, is anywhere an avalanche can start, run, or stop. Generally, we think about avalanche terrain, and I love this picture because I really want to ski this mountain. Not when it looks like this. I don't want to ski when it looks like this. This is where the avalanche started. It's what we call the crown, right? So this crown was probably, 10 feet high. The perspectives are very, very hard to imagine, but it was probably quite a large crown, and there's another crown up here. So we think about avalanche terrain as being very steep, open slopes. And avalanches generally do start where the slope angle is 35 to 40 degrees, and the slopes are open, meaning that there aren't a lot of trees or rocks to anchor the snow down. That's pretty obvious, right, to stay out of those areas. However, avalanche terrain is not only where avalanches can start, but it's also where they can run and where they can stop. So this whole thing went, and you can see it ran here, and then it ran all the way down here. this, where the avalanche stopped, is a relatively flat space. So if you were standing down here, you're like, I'm on flat ground, I'm probably safe. And then this avalanche happens and like takes you out, right? So it's not only what you're standing on, but it's like what's above you, what's around you. Are you in avalanche terrain? Also, avalanche terrain includes any feature that can magnify the consequences of an avalanche, and we call these terrain traps. Terrain traps are gullies, creek beds, and cliff bands. This last picture, or this picture that I showed, this open creek, definitely a terrain trap, right? Because it totally magnified the consequences of that small avalanche. Yeah, question?
I was just thinking you could point out the people with the high marks for snowmobilers between those avalanches.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at these guys. Look what they were doing.
Yeah.
In avalanche terrain, high avalanche danger. Good eye.
Large motor smoke.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of times you'll see ski tracks going into the avalanche, right? You're like, whoa, that's really good. Yeah, for sure. So gullies and creek beds, right? So these are depressions, and how they magnify the consequences of avalanches is they can pile the snow really high. And so if you can imagine like this run out here, the snow's probably deep, but if it piles up into some type of depression, it can get even deeper. And the deeper you're buried in an avalanche, the less likely your chances are of survival. Cliff bands are also an issue. There's some cliff bands here and here. Because like that creek that snowboarder was pushed into, even small avalanches can push you off cliff bands, and then you can fall and really injure yourself. So avalanche terrain is where avalanches can start, run, stop, and also it includes terrain traps. So the second leg of our triangle was unstable snow. This one's kind of tricky. This is Dallas Glass. I don't know if anyone knows him. He's the deputy director of the Northwest Avalanche Center. He's an avalanche forecaster, and this is generally what he does all winter long, is he's crouched over in the snow staring at snow grains. This is what I did for a large part of my winter. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to judge how and why that avalanche happened, why that snowpack is unstable. He is actually investigating snowpack layers. So there's a number of ways that we can tell if the snowpack is unstable, and one is to investigate snowpack layers. This is very complicated. It takes years, sometimes even decades of experience to understand what you're looking at. There are also red flags, like if there is an avalanche, don't ski that, right, because it has avalanched. So it indicates that the snow is unstable. But I think the best resource when you're first starting out is going to be your local Avalanche Center. And I don't know where y'all are from, kind of all over the western part of the United States is what I'm assuming. But we in the Pacific Northwest, so these circles indicate all the different local avalanche centers that are located across the United States. NWAC, the Northwest Avalanche Center, is one of the bigger ones. It's this whole area here, the Olympic Peninsula, and then this little blob, which is Mount Hood. This little blob right here, that's Mount Hood. And that was my area, it was Mount Hood when I was doing professional observations there. There are also pretty extensive networks of local avalanche centers in Colorado, all over Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, California. There's even one in New Hampshire. I always just figured that like it was ice over there, but apparently there's avalanche danger. But these local avalanche centers are located all over the United States, and they are an incredibly good resource of information. They'll have a lot of verbiage about the forecast, a lot of it's jargon, so it's hard to understand. But one of the most obvious things that they will do is they will rate the danger in the area. And they do it using a 5-point scale from 1 to 5. 1 is low, meaning that generally safe avalanche conditions. Also, that means generally kind of crappy skiing, so I don't like to go out when the avalanche danger is low. Usually means it's icy. 2 is moderate, 3 is considerable, 4 is high, and 5 is extreme. Moderate means heightened avalanche conditions on specific terrain features, evaluate snow and terrain carefully, identify features of concern. Considerable means dangerous avalanche conditions, careful snowpack evaluation, cautious route finding, and conservative decision making are essential. Considerable is the rating during which most people die in avalanches. I would advise, if you aren't super experienced in the backcountry and with avalanches, if the rating is considerable, to stay out of avalanche terrain. These can be very, very tricky conditions to evaluate. And then high, of course, very dangerous avalanche conditions. Most people stay out of avalanche terrain when the avalanche rating is high. And then there's extreme, which means just stay home. The danger ratings are also, they're forecasted for 3 different elevation bands, for below tree line, at tree line, and above tree line. Generally below tree line, there's enough trees that anchor the snow and increase the stability. And so the general trend is, this is always the case, but the general trend is as you go up in elevation, you also increase in avalanche danger. The avalanche forecasts are usually for 2 days, the day you're looking at, and then the next day. So your local avalanche centers are great resources for any type of avalanche information that you're interested in. The third leg is an avalanche trigger. And what a trigger does is it has enough force to disrupt the cohesive bonds of the snow and cause the snow to break and then start to slide. There are natural triggers. Most avalanches are caused by natural triggers. Those triggers can be wind, rain, snow, explosives. That's not a natural trigger, but explosives can cause avalanches. But this statistic I really like because 90% of fatal avalanches are triggered by the victim or the victim's party. So there are a lot of avalanches that happen when no one's around. Generally, if someone's involved in an avalanche, that person or someone in their party has triggered it. And this is important because it gives us power, right? Like if you don't drop into that slope, then you're not going to get caught in an avalanche. So it makes it important for us to understand more about avalanches and avalanche risks before we drop onto slopes. Okay, so those are the 3 causes of the avalanches in the avalanche triangle: avalanche terrain, unstable snow, and a trigger. If you are unfortunate enough to get caught in an avalanche, there are certain things that you can do to decrease or actually to increase your risk of survival. And the first one, and I have this in red, is because carry and know how to use safety gear. There are a lot of classes that you can take to teach you, a lot of formal classes you can take to teach you how to use this equipment, which I highly recommend. Generally, we consider 3 pieces of avalanche gear, avalanche safety gear essential. These are the Avalanche Transceiver, the Avalanche Probe, and the Avalanche Shovel. A transceiver, which is this, it's like a little box that you either wear in a harness around your chest or put it into a pocket. It's a super cool piece of technology. It can both send and receive radio frequencies. There's a bazillion different kinds and a bunch of different makers, but they all talk to each other because they all use the same frequency. The idea being that when you start on your tour, everybody is in send mode. So their transceiver is sending a signal. And then if one of your party gets trapped in an avalanche and buried, everybody else switches their transceivers to receive. And so now they can receive that signal. And these transceivers act like homing beacons. They can not only tell you how far away that signal is that they're detecting, they can tell you which direction to go in. And so you literally just look at the LCD screen and it's like 3 meters to your left. And then you walk in that direction until you hit a low point. Once you get there, you pull out your Avalanche Pro, which is a lot like a tent pole, and then you poke around in the snow until you poke and find the person, and then you dig them out with your shovel. Okay, and those are kind of like the 3 steps of safety if someone in your party does get buried in an avalanche. There are airbags that I have read are quite effective in decreasing avalanche deaths. And there's also some other things like an Avalon and a few other devices that have been invented. Airbags I have read are actually quite preventative. Question? Yeah.
Do those avalanche cords work at all if it's a fairly shallow avalanche?
So, do you have experience with avalanche cords?
So that's very, so an avalanche cord, first off, what's an avalanche cord? It's like paracord, it's a long
Yeah, right, a long string.
that you would hang behind you, right?
Yeah.
That was the technology people used before beacons became prevalent. The hope being that it rides on top of an avalanche, and if I find it, I will track you down to,
So yeah.
so far less effective than avalanche beacons. I've never used one, but because they at least had analog beacons when I was doing it. But an old timer told me they are great because by the time you take it out of your bag and you undo the knot, maybe you'll think twice about crossing that avalanche line.
I heard
This
it
is
sure makes
decided,
it
help
easier
you
to
find a
find the
lost
body.
ski sometimes, because that
I'm
lost
sorry.
ski, if you lose your ski,
Yeah.
it does help you find your lost skis sometimes, but that's not an avalanche. And those, good to hear about the probes, because I remember the first ones, they just go beep, 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 and as you got closer, it would go beep, 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 and that's,
Yeah, those are the old ones. You had to
Yeah.
like tune into like the pitch of the frequent. I don't know.
yeah, you went in, go on, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no.
It's wonderful.
You have another question?
So my turret's gear has,
Reco.
Reco.
yeah,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? How effective are those looks like?
So I don't. So those are mostly for inbound. Most inbound
Right.
clothes have them. We have PMR. We have a Reco detector. It's a reflector, right? You might know more about the technology.
So she's asking about the microchips called Reco reflectors that's sewn into your ski boots or your apparel. We're seeing it all over the place. And Paige, always very right. It's really a great technology for inbounds because it's for rapid response and a lot of, the vast majority of inbound skiers don't carry avalanche gear, right? There are a few of us out there do, and if you're skiing even inbounds, steep avalanche terrain, I would suggest you carry it.
I've seen it more and more recently.
Which is good. But the idea is that if you get buried and you don't have a beacon, the ski patrol can use what we call a Reco detector to locate you. It's fine for inbounds, and it's another piece of equipment. It's not, I wouldn't want to bet my life on it. They've got their issues. And the other thing is for out of bounds or side country, like by the time we show up with our Reco reflector, it'll be great for us because we're not going to have to spend all day looking for your body with a probe. It's not going to be a life-saving thing for you. So it's nice, it's cheap, it adds about 50 cents to the cost of apparel, but it's not something that I would rely on and could bet my life on if I was regularly skiing avalanche terrain.
The range of detection is much smaller than with transceivers, right?
Yeah, it's about 100 feet or something like that, so roughly on par.
Roughly
but
on par.
Not something I'd bet my life on. So.
They're in.
Reco is a passive.
Right.
Yeah, it's a reflector.
How long do they have like anything?
Yeah, so
The
it's-
Reco?
Yeah, the Reco is a microchip that gets excited by our detectors. We send out a radio wave, it energizes it and reflects it back almost like radar, so there's no battery in the microchips.
The transceivers have batteries.
Yeah.
Yeah, question.
Hi, I'm from Crystal Mountain
Yeah.
in Washington, and we lose a few people this last year to tree wells. Are the Recos good for that, or are you going to talk about tree wells? Because that's a real danger for us.
I mean, I could talk about tree wells. There are more deaths in tree wells than there are in avalanches inbounds. My advice for tree well skiing is I would carry backcountry gear. I mean, like I was telling Steve, I skied at Meadows for the first time in a couple of years this year, and I was amazed at how many people I saw wearing packs with avalanche gear in them. The Reco is useful, but again, it's not as effective as a transceiver. And I was skiing in some trees a couple of years ago at Meadows, and I fell into a tree well, and my ski partner had like skied off and left me. That's a different story. We still have to talk about that. And I fell into a tree well, and I got stuck from my waist up. And it took me half an hour to get myself out, right? And so I think that skiing with a partner is actually much more effective than relying on technology and making sure that you have you're at least in shouting distance, if not eyesight, of your partner when you go skiing in the trees, especially with a high tree well danger. Because tree well dangers are real dangers, and you can die of asphyxiation, snow immersion relatively easily in them. So the other thing you can do if you get caught in an avalanche is try to exit the avalanche to the side. Avalanches tend to start slow and then speed up. So if you can, get out of them, you should. Jettison any equipment that you can. Your skis will drag you further down. Your skis and your snowboard will drag you further down. They will generally pop off. Some people ski with leashes. I ski with leashes in the backcountry because I have a pair of skis that doesn't have brakes. But I went and bought special breakable leashes that will break if I get caught in an avalanche. You know, the advice is try to stay close to the surface. I can't imagine if you're caught in a 70-mile-per-hour avalanche how you know where the surface is, but try, I guess. Punch your hand up is some advice because we do look for surface clues. And then make an air pocket if at all possible. The majority of people that die in avalanches die from asphyxiation. 75% die from asphyxiation. And so if you can make an air pocket, that means that snow will not go into your nose and mouth and suffocate you as fast. And so we have a little bit more time to come find you. The other 25% die from traumatic injury. And then there's a very small percentage that die from hypothermia, but it's pretty negligible. Yeah.
How are we making that air pocket? Or is
Like
much
this,
as we can?
like a lot of times people will just do this. Some people, I've read that you can put your hand under your elbow, but I think this would probably be the most effective. Because what happens is, if you don't have an air pocket, the snow will not only get into your nose and mouth, but when you breathe out, it will make that snow moist and then it'll freeze like a mask. So if you can keep it off your face, that's gonna be the most effective. Yeah.
So you say punch your hand up,
Yeah.
then you go like this, so when do you punch your hand up?
Right, so you know what? If I got caught in an avalanche, I would probably panic. So I'm probably the last person to give you advice. I think trying to make sure you have an air pocket of some kind and then punching your hand up and also depends on how deep you are. Like if you're buried 3 feet under, punching your hand up isn't really gonna do anything.
You should have a visual model. 70 mile an hour avalanche, slabs the size of microwaves. You're swimming with one arm, covering your mouth with the other, and then, I don't know, sticking a foot up. Don't get caught in an avalanche.
Yeah, the easiest thing is just not get caught in an avalanche. So the statistics, right? Complete burials, if you're completely buried in an avalanche, these are also good reasons not to get caught. There's a 50% survival rate. So there's a 50-50 chance if you get completely buried that you'll survive. At 15 minutes, there's a greater than 90% survival rate. After 30 minutes, however, that number precipitously drops to around 20 to 30%. So if you get caught in an avalanche, your friends have about 15 minutes to find you in order for your survival rate to be good. And after 2 hours, there's basically a 0% survival rate. So the idea being, don't get caught in an avalanche. How to mitigate risk, right? So this is super important. Avalanche education and training. I do recommend that, and I have some resources in the next slide. Checking your local avalanche forecast. If it's considerable or higher, stay in bounds. Recognize and avoid avalanche terrain. Obey signage and ropes at resorts. I have noticed, like I was saying, that a lot of people at Meadows are now skiing with backcountry gear because they understand that even if they do drop in a Heather Canyon, right, even though Heather Canyon is mitigated for avalanche, the risk is not zero, right? And also it takes ski patrollers a while to get there. So ask at the resort, like where those areas of high risk are. Ski with a partner, like with the tree well thing, I highly recommend skiing with a partner. That fatality at Meadows could possibly have been avoided if that snowboarder was skiing with a partner. Carry and know how to use proper safety gear, and if at all concerned, just ski something more mellow.
I have one comment. Yeah. When you're going to the ski area or coming from the ski area, if you have to stop, don't stop where you know there might be an avalanche chute that comes down, or where you know it has a history of sliding. So watch where if you have to stop, watch where you park.
Exactly, good advice. Yeah.
So if I'm in bounds, and let's say it snowed a couple feet the night before, so obviously I'm like it's a fresh powder, it's a steep slope, I'm in bounds. Are there signs I can see on the snow, the terrain that's gonna say, there's some red flags, I should avoid it?
There are a number of signs you can look for. I think if you're inbounds, I think the best thing you can do is talk to the ski patrollers and ask them, because what the ski patrollers do, what they're doing the couple of hours before the ski resort opens is they're patrolling that ski area and they're doing snow pit assessments and they're looking at the avalanche, what they feel like the avalanche danger is. So generally on just runs, like even black runs, if you're in bounds, the avalanche danger is gonna be pretty low, or else they wouldn't open those runs or they would mitigate them. There are certain areas at ski resorts where the avalanche danger is known and is difficult to mitigate. So I think your best bet is to talk with the ski patrollers and ask them what they recommend and what terrain they recommend to ski in.
How many people have skied Europe? Rules are totally different. In Europe, anything outside of a groomed run is considered off-piste. Unlike the US, where there are generally control gates to get side country or back country, in Europe, anything that is not groomed is considered off-piste.
Yeah, groomed runs for sure have very low avalanche danger because they're groomed. So the last slide I have here, and I can make this slide available for folks if you're interested. These are educational resources that I recommend, the different types of formal avalanche education courses, and then some resources for statistics and more educational online resources. And with that, I will turn this over to Steve, who will now entertain you.
All right, so, I love Paige's expertise, and she's a great example of one of the kick-ass women we have in PMR. We've been, really trying hard to recruit women, and I personally have always valued them on our rescue teams because they balance out the testosterone and bring a really nice bit of logic to the situation often. So I'm just super happy to have her here. And I'll ask for a little bit of flexibility because I think I'm going to tell a story that I didn't put some slides in for, just because it dovetails really nicely into your presentation. Also, there's a homework assignment. In addition to all the resources she's had, I want you guys to go out on YouTube and do a quick search for getting caught in an avalanche, because with all the people wearing GoPros and whatnot, there are a lot of videos where you get to experience firsthand what it's like to be in a slide, and if that doesn't give you religion, then you probably should give up that sport and pick up knitting or something. So, exactly. I'm just going to talk a little bit and tell some stories about rescues that I've been on. I've been doing this for 26 years. I'm going to try to weave in some safety messages from these. At the end, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, but this is very interactive, as Paige's was, so if you have any questions or comments or whatever, then feel free to chime in. So first off, who here, is anybody here on Volunteer Ski Patrol or has done Volunteer Ski Patrol before? I just don't know. Okay, one in the back. Well, thank you for your service, right? Thank you. So, I bring that up because there's a lot of organizations, as Paige alluded to, that does search and rescue, and you don't have to be an expert climber or an expert skier to be involved in search and rescue. Every area of the United States has volunteer rescue groups, and if you have solid outdoor skills and an interest of giving your time and money, and there is personal money in almost all of them that you have to contribute for your own gear and whatnot, but you can go out and have the good feeling of saving somebody's life. And so I thought the first thing I talk about was my first rescue, because it's nice to reflect on that, especially it's kind of scary to think it's been 26 years. Like you get involved in this kind of thing and you don't realize it's going to become a way of life. So I had been, actually this, I don't know where's my laser. So that's my butt. That's the only photo I have of that rescue, but it was up at Muir Lake on Mount Hood. It wasn't really that dramatic of a rescue in all things, but I'd been given a pager. When my pager went off, boy, I can't tell you how exciting that was. Darn it, I'm on a rescue mission, let's go. And I pull up into the parking lot, and all of a sudden, like, my IQ rolls back to that of an 8. Like, I don't know, and give me some latitude. I'm normally a little bit higher than that, so it went down. So here I'm an experienced mountaineer, an experienced outdoorsman. I've been brought into Portland Mountain Rescue, totally excited. We got a mission, and all of a sudden I feel like I don't know anything. I don't even know how to dress myself, right? And like the reason why is that rescue work is different than when we go out on a backcountry ski tour or a hike or backpacking trip. And so, humbly I had to go ask, like, well, what should I bring? Should I bring this, that, the other thing? Apparently I brought a quick draw. I'm not certain why I felt like I needed that, but I had it there. Anyway, so that was my first rescue on Mount Hood in 1996. I'm going to skip ahead, and I don't have a slide for this, but I'm going to talk about my first body recovery because I think it dovetails into some of the stories that Paige was saying. Paige, sorry. So there was a day when she talked about don't go in the backcountry when the avalanche hazard's extreme. It was 1998, so I've been a rescuer for 2 years, and it was very much like this year in terms of bad weather patterns, where every weekend normally the climbing season on Mount Hood, roughly defined, is like May through June, and every weekend it was stormy, big storms, rainy weather, and everything like that. Nobody could go out and play on the mountain, and then bam, we had our first 80-degree sunny day. And what we know about avalanches is any kind of extreme weather change, you can probably assume, you don't have to know anything about avalanche. If the weather changes extremely, probably the avalanche hazard has as well. We knew that the avalanche hazard was going to be so high that day that the climbing ranger on Mount Hood took the unprecedented step of posting a warning sign in the climbers register, virtually begging people not to climb. Okay, literally. How many people? There were true, I don't even know if Mount Hood's seen that many people. I think there were 600 people trying to reach the south side of Mount Hood that day. Truly an anthill. What happened with the rescue? Well, there was a local climbing club that taught climbing skills, and their basic climb school involved a graduation climb. So these people had weeks of training and evening lectures and weekends work, learning how to self-rest, how to put crampons on, how to work with ropes. This is their graduation climb. They've gotten up at midnight, climbed all the way up to the base of West Crater Rim, which is a known avalanche slope. The climbing guidebooks say, avoid this during high avalanche danger. I was driving up to the mountain that day, and I almost drove off the highway. I could not believe the scope and breadth and depth of avalanches that were occurring. There was an avalanche that looked like it almost hit the top of Palmer. I mean, it's just stunning. Like, you've never seen anything like that before. And I don't know how, but I knew with that many people on the mountain and that much avalanching, there had to be an accident. As I pull into Timberline Lodge, I see an ambulance right in front of it, and I just rolled down my window and they said, "Avalanche, go." And I'm like, all right, so I get my stuff. 2 years of mountain rescue under my belt, so I'm an expert at that point, right? I get my stuff, we go up there. No beacons on the crew. There were 4 climbers that were caught in the slide, so no avalanche gear. 1 had a broken pelvis, 2 kind of emerged basically unscathed, and 1 was buried and missing. And with no beacon, we'd already checked to make sure there was no beacon. Reco didn't exist back then, so we had to form a probe line. So we had metal conduit, and we're shoving it in the snow, shoving the snow, shoving the snow, step forward. We're all lined up in a line, and you're just, probing for a body, right? And we actually got pretty lucky. It seemed like it was about 2 hours into this. We found the person buried, average burial depth, about 4 feet, face down in the snow. He was deceased. The forces, when we talk about, swimming and avalanche, back then they used larger climbing ropes, and this climbing club used the largest climbing rope, like a 12 millimeter climbing rope for their basic climb school. This broke a 12 millimeter diameter climbing rope about 30 feet from his body. His climbing helmet was like a standard Petzl rock helmet that a lot of people have seen when you see people climb. The hydraulic forces were enough for the snow to enter the ventilation holes of the helmet, build up under that snow, and cause the chin strap to insert into his neck. So I just say that because I think that that's a great illustration of why you don't want to be in an avalanche. Like, forget the swimming and whatnot. If you're swimming in an avalanche, you've probably made some mistakes along the way to get there. The interesting thing about that was the climbers that got in that climb school, they got to the base of that slope and they're like, all right, we're gonna take some food, water, put your harness on. This is when the climbing gets going. Now, this far it's been a slog up a ski slope. Now we're really gonna climb a mountain. And while they're doing that, 2 other climb teams came by and said, "Do you mind if we play through?" And, "Oh, go for it." And they climbed right up that slope and nothing happened to them. Now, we asked the climb leader after that accident, and this was an experienced climber, like, why'd you had to climb over avalanche debris to get to that slope? Like, how, help us out understand that. And he's easy. I thought that the slope had already slid. So here's somebody with all this training that has used all that knowledge and experience to justify why the slope is safe, not why it's unsafe. And I'm saying this for educational purposes, not to say, well, look, I wouldn't have done that, because you know what? I probably would have made that same decision, and I think any of us would have. Because think about what it was like to be that climb leader. You've got all these students that have worked for weeks, evenings, weekends, rented this gear, got up at midnight, slogged miles up the slope, and you're there at the base of this slope. 2 climb teams have gone up the slope and they're fine. There are 600 people over there. It's an anthill on the standard climbing route. It's a beautiful day, and you're gonna go, you know what, I don't feel good, we should turn around. They're gonna think you're nuts. Absolutely nuts. So think about the human factors that play into this thing. Mother Nature does not care, okay? She's gonna do what she's gonna do. So the big lesson with this is, don't put yourself in that situation. Talk about your plans before you get out of the car, and say, hey, the avalanche hazard's going to be high today. Maybe you're going to say, hey, we're going to go up a little ways, maybe we'll go up to 9,000 feet, we'll take a pit, we'll look at what's going on. I got to tell you, avalanche hazard's really high today. There's even a warning sign. So we're going to go a little up, but I tell you, we're probably not going to summit today, and we're probably going to see a lot of people that are, and I want to let you know that that's no guarantee of safety. They don't know any better. When that avalanche hazard happened, the 600 people on Mount Hood, you know how many people had avalanche gear? 5 PMR members. That's it. And that's because springtime avalanches, people don't think about avalanches. They think of it as a wintertime thing. And there's the sheep syndrome of there's 600 people. If they're doing it, it must be fine, right? And then what about the human factors that brought all those 600 people up there? It was the missed opportunity of bad weekend, bad weekend, bad weekend, bad weekend. Climbing season's almost over. I'm going to climb this weekend. Nobody was thinking about avalanches and even ignored the sign. So I'm worried that that's going to play out this year because it's the same kind of weather pattern. I mean, look, who wants to climb today? Like, not a great day to climb. But if next weekend it's 80 degrees, you're going to be busy. I'm going to go out of town or something. I don't know. Anyway, so just a good story there. I'm sorry I don't have a picture, but it occurred to me at the time. And that is one of the things about doing search and rescue. You get some really great stories. So, I told Paige, I said, well, you can go first and don't worry about time because I'm like a gas. I expand to whatever container you put me in. So I can keep talking, and in fact, someone's going to have to cut me off here. But so I thought people want to know what's the most exciting rescue that you've ever done. So I'll tell this story. And this is not our everyday rescue by any stretch of the imagination. But in 2002, I don't know, I think it was May of 2002, we got called for a climber that was stranded on the sandy head wall on Mount Hood. So I'm going to just go forward real quick. Again, she showed you the aspects of the mountain. This is the sandy head wall. This guy was right here. Back in 2002, cell phones were not as ubiquitous as they are today, so it was a climbing team of 3. One guy got sick for some way and couldn't finish the climb, so they basically secured, I guess he was in and out of consciousness and stuff, they secured him to the head wall, climbed up over the mountain, down to Timberline Lodge, called 911. By the time we got there, I think I got to Timberline Lodge at 9:30 at night, and when they told me it was over on the sandy head wall, I was like, well, good grief, it's going to take forever and a day to get a rescue team over there. I mean, that's like the most remote side of Mount Hood. Can we get a helicopter? And they called, and there was an Air Force Pavehawk, which is basically a Blackhawk. So if you imagine a Blackhawk with a refueling nozzle, that's effectively a Pavehawk. Except they're much heavier aircraft, so they cannot fly as high. But they were doing night exercises in the gorge, so they diverted one to Timberline Lodge. They landed. And because of the weight of that helicopter and the elevation that we thought this climber was at, they could only take 2 people, 2 rescuers. So I, as a rescue leader, was chosen. They took a paramedic, which has a higher medical certification than I do. And the idea was they were going to fly us in, and we were going to set down and stabilize this guy, and they'd send in a ground team overnight, and we'd haul him out the next day. So I get on this helicopter with my rescue gear and everything. I'm a new rescue leader, and we take off at night, and we're flying around the side of the mountain. And I also remember it was one of those few nights that they said the Aurora Borealis may be visible from Portland. And I have never seen the Northern Lights. So I will tell you that I was like, looking for the climber, look at the Northern Lights. So no problem. Did not see the Northern Lights, but we did see the climber. He was signaling it with his headlamp. He connected the dots, okay, this helicopter is probably for me. And we're circling around, they were trying to find a place to land, and I was like, there's no trauma here. The guy, to our knowledge, he hasn't fallen and he hasn't been hit by anything, so we don't really have to worry about cervical spine precautions or anything like that. If you could just put me down there, I can probably go get him, and then we can just get out of here, right? So they could not find a place flat enough to land, and you think about it, the rotors on a helicopter stick out quite a bit from the body. If you're on a steep slope, those rotors are going to hit the slope, so you've got to have a fairly flat terrain to land on. So the next thing I know, I'm being attached by my climbing harness to the hoist and hoisted out of the side of the helicopter, and they're flying by a night vision, so they've got really poor depth perception with that. So, and the other thing is the Air Force Pararescue, they're combat search and rescue. So these days we're doing a lot of rescues with the medevac out of Salem. Medevac has a nice little red cross on it that says "Don't shoot me" if you're adhering to the laws of war. The combat search and rescue guys, their first protocol is return fire. So they're used to being shot at. So because of that, their protocols are different, where when they come in to do a hoist like that, they don't want to spin out 200 feet of cable and like have this, nice target for the enemy to shoot at. They come in really low and bzz, bzz, little tiny. So they are hovering with the blades like 6 feet off the head wall. And I can't use a headlamp because if I do, I'll blind the pilot, which is not good practice when you're flying in the mountains. So out I go, and I lower down, disconnect, they take off, and it gets quiet. It's just the two of us on the head wall. I climb up 100 feet to this guy. I'm like, hey, I'm Steve Rollins with Portland Mountain Rescue. He figured that out by then. And I said, I asked him, like, do you want to leave tonight or tomorrow? And he said, tonight. So, all right, well, we're going to go. So I help him climb down to where they let me off, and I check his harness, because I don't know if this guy knows. I don't know him at all. He might not have, hate to attach him to the hoist and see him slip out of the harness. Like, that'd be awkward at best. So, so I call the helicopter in, and I just can't do justice to what this is like. So first off, it's dark. The hoist comes down, there's a little carabiner, and there's a glow stick, and a dim glow stick at that. Now, the rotor wash, the wind coming down with the helicopter is like 110 miles an hour. So it's blowing that thing around like crazy. And I don't know if you guys know that, anybody do hoists in the military before or anything? So, okay, just, you never know who you're talking to. But so it's not like the movies where you just grab the hoist, because it will knock you on your ass. They get a static charge built up on them, so you need to let it ground, and that discharges the static, and then you can grab the cable. But this thing's whipping around, like I have no idea if this thing's touching the ground or not. Eventually I kind of assume it does, and get them connected, and then you're being sandblasted with all the loose, like, it's corn snow, it's May, so just being sandblasted by that. Your pack straps are just beating you in the face. I can scream in your ear, you can't hardly hear a thing. So we got to use hand signals. So the hand signal is, he's connected, so spool him up. And so up he goes, and they take off, and I'm alone on the sandy head wall at night. Now, as Paige will tell you, the hardest thing about climbing the sandy head wall is getting to the sandy head wall. So there was a little part of me that's like, I could just go for it. No, they were like that. But, but there was a part of me that was awfully tempted, because I'm like through the hardest part of them right there. So after a couple minutes, they have to go recalculate their load, and then they come fly back in to pick me up. And so as he flies in, again, repeat. Cable comes down, there's 6 feet off the head wall, complete sensory overload, things whipping around, and I'm trying to figure out if it's touched the ground, and like even grabbing it, because it's whipping around with such violence is a challenge. But I'm looking over the tail rotor. So tail rotor here, it's coming closer and closer and closer, because they have poor depth perception. So, there's hand signals for I'm connected, spool me. There's no hand signal for you're going to cut me a little bitch if you don't stop. So I got like desperate at that point. I just grabbed the thing, like, it's going to grab me. Well, I guess it grounded because I didn't get any shock, and I attached myself, and I'm like, all right, let's get out of here. And they don't want to hover there any longer than they need to. So next thing I know, they take off, and I'm dangling under the helicopter at night as they fly me around the side of the mountain and then spool me up as we go. So that was exciting, to say the least. And I think, the big learning from that was you can't do like a mountain rescue at night on a hoist at a helicopter and not kind of feel like a badass afterwards. So I got home, I just started dating Jen, who's now my wife. It's like 2 a.m, and she's asleep, and I'm like, you wouldn't believe what I just did. So needless to say, I told my friends and family. I remember my fellow rescuers congratulating me, but I knew there was a great degree of jealousy, like, God, I wish I could have done that. And I knew that, but I was like, guys, it was really dangerous too, so just as well, and I realized that that's not ringing true, and I probably sound like an ass doing it, but that's what I said. So, fast forward 1 week to the day, and you get my most that was exciting, two exciting rescues. Okay. So you can find this on YouTube as well. I'm at work, and my pager goes off for a page for 9 climbers that fell into a crevasse. And I'm like, seriously? Like, how does that happen? So this is the south side of Mount Hood. This is the Hog's Back. And you can see little anthill of people kind of going up here. So this is an aerial view of Mount Hood. What happened was climbers were relying, and anybody a mountaineer here or taken mountaineering classes? All right, so did they teach you that you can rope up and if somebody falls and everybody goes into self-arrest? Exactly, everybody arrests, and like if you can't arrest your fall, then don't worry, we will. Yeah. I got news for you. The rope kind of only ensures that no man dies alone. Man, sounds good until you think about it, but this top guy fell, and I think, as I recall, they were on their way down. He could not arrest, and he yanked this person off his feet. They couldn't arrest, yanked that person, and the entire rope team came down. They clotheslined this two-man rope team, which then clotheslined these climbers there. Yeah, there's 3 climbers right there. Right here, this red part is called the Bergschrund crevasse. It's a big crevasse. It opens up in the springtime. It's always in the same place. And this climb team was part of this climb team. These guys just missed it, so they witnessed it. And basically they came down as a domino effect, and they came down in a rat's nest and whatnot. In the accident, 3 climbers died, and 4 were seriously injured. So this was like already right out of the gate one of the biggest mountain rescues we've had on Mount Hood. You knew it when you got the page. And when I got up there, I was the first rescue leader on scene, and they gave me a choice. Do you want to go in helicopter or snowcat? Helicopter would be here in a half an hour. And I made the conscious decision to take the snowcat for a couple of reasons. One, I was acutely aware through our training that helicopters in the mountains are dangerous. 2, helicopters are prone to mechanical failures and weight limitations. And I don't know, you're not even here yet. I'm going to take the known quantity, take the snowcat, even though it's like an hour ride up there. I've never seen a snowcat driver get a snowcat that high. He almost got it to the crater. Like, it got to the point where I was like, okay, we'll get out now. That's good, thanks. It's like really getting scary. Like, and you're looking down in a White River Canyon going, God, if he loses it, like, this is going to be a bad way to go. Anyway, so all these people are helping out. There's climbers from all over the place because it's a busy spring climbing day. People are helping out. I show up on scene. On the lower Hogsback, we encounter our first patient. He's sitting by himself silently. No one's paying attention to him. The guy is absolutely ashen. And so I took 2 of my team members, one of which was a nurse. I'm like, you help this guy. The rest of us will go up top. While we're doing this, we had no way to talk on the radio directly to the helicopters. So we were scrambling on the ground to kind of get ready for the next patient. And while I'm heading up the Hogsback, there's actually, if I go back a slide, whoops, I'm going the wrong direction. This person, Selena, was like completely wigged out. I mean, she'd just seen 3 people die and all these people, seriously injured. So she was needing a full static belay from 2 people on a rope just to walk down what you and I would just run down normally, like the lower part of the Hogsback. And she didn't have her ice axe. Well, this helicopter comes in, Payfock, to do a hoist. And let's see, here's one of the hoists, and here's the scene. So, anybody see anything wrong with this photo? Just curious, like anything like, that gives me pause. Yeah, that's the crevasse, and here's the basket coming down out of the helicopter. When I go, should I put you on the spot? Do you see anything that you don't like? I won't put you in the spot. Look at how many people are under this.
I was wondering, like, he's hovering right over the car.
Oh, yeah. There's no offset. Yeah, so as this comes in, I can't communicate to him, so we're just trying to get involved. I'm covering Selena from all the, literally covering her with my parka from all the blowing snow and ice and everything like that. And in the middle, and I had yelled, anybody not immediately involved in this hoist needs to go down the Hogsback now. But that's no fun, right? Like, it is fun to be underneath the helicopter, because what story you're going to say, like, hey, I left just before it showed up, or like, hey, I was right there. So everybody's under that helicopter, and no way to hold off the helicopter until we're ready. I'm covering Selena, and something, and I think it maybe was just like a change in the wind, because you're like getting battered, and then all of a sudden you're not. Something caused me to look up, and I remember to this day, like looking through a toilet paper tube. Like, my world was this big as the helicopter pirouettes down, and actually this is a Black Hawk, not a Pave Hawk, so This is not the one that crashed, but imagine this has a little refueling nozzle that looks like a cannon sticking out the front. That struck the snow right here, and I'm like, oh, that's not right. And I knew it was crashing at that point, but this was absolute like slow motion. And I was thinking of jumping in the crevasse because, again, I can't explain this, but imagine deafeningly loud, sensory overload, being blasted by all this wind and snow. You can't hear anything, and in an instant, the rotors shear off and it goes dead silence. You hear some screams, but basically dead silent, and it's kerchunk, kerchunk, kerchunk.
As the body rolls downhill.
As the body rolls from here all the way down here. It rolled over at least two of the flight crew twice. One was attached by the gunner's belt, and that poor guy couldn't get thrown free. One of the other guys got thrown free, but he was downhill at the helicopter, thought, oh, I'm free, and looked up and went, uh-oh, here it comes. And supposedly the snow was soft enough that I don't know that for a fact, but it seemed like that maybe that's what saved him. But nobody in the helicopter died. So I basically, there was that oh shit moment, and it had been so chaotic. That movie Black Hawk Down had just come out, and somebody got on the radio and screamed, Black Hawk Down! And I'm like, well, that's kind of cliche, but so I first wanted to make sure we didn't have everybody run down to the helicopter, so I made sure we had a rescuer on each patient, because that's not going to feel good if you're strapped in the litter and everybody runs away from you and you don't even know what happened to your helicopter. And I remember verbatim, I called down to Starbase and I said, I presume you know the helicopter crashed. And they said, yeah. All right, well, I don't want any more helicopters up here right now, because it had just been completely chaos. And I'm going to re-triage the scene, and I will I'll check back with you in a couple minutes. And the good thing about having all these people around was that lots of people had medical skills. There was even an ER doctor on site. I mean, just by coincidence. So I was able to put a medic on every single patient, just a sign, and then I took the senior most medical person. I'm like, okay, your job is go get the vitals and tell me who needs to go first. My job was least interesting. I got to sit there with a clipboard and say, all right, the guy at the Berkshire, we need him to go first, right? The guys that fly these, they are so badass. Okay, they're good when they have no ego, that you can show them something and they're very eager to learn and whatnot. There's no high-fiving, need for speed, any of that. These guys are really humble guys. And I remember, actually, this next slide here, I remember this guy with the helmet, shook his head, which great thing to do after you get a helicopter, shake your head, but he gets out, takes the helmet off, shakes his head, and I was offering him, do you want a helicopter ride, or we can take a ski patroller and have him take you down? And he goes, I'm not getting on another helicopter in my entire life. So that told me volumes about what that experience was like. When we got done, just shortly after this, we got all the patients evacuated and did a quick, make sure we didn't miss anybody. I'd hate to miss the guy that can't breathe, silently dying to the side, and we're all high-fiving or something like that, So we accounted for everybody, and then I just said, all right, we still have 3 bodies to recover, and I don't want any more accidents. This has been traumatic, to say the least. So everybody just go take 15 minutes, go decompress or whatever. We'll come back to the Hog's Back, and then we'll start, re-gearing up for these body recoveries. And I went down to the same area and grabbed my backpack, and then I was like, God, I should probably call someone. I had no idea that this was filmed live on the news.
Never seen it.
Yeah, and I had people in London and Tokyo going, I just saw you rollins on the news. I called my girlfriend, who I'd woken up at 2 a.m. 1 week earlier from the helicopter rescue, and she didn't answer. Really? So then I called my mom, and phone didn't even ring, right? Boom, she's there. I'm like, I'm okay. I had no idea it was on the news at that point. But all my coworkers, I worked at Nike at the time. They served beer on campus. It's a different place. Big screen television, and they put the news on. Local news usually was playing on there. So all my coworkers that know I'm doing mountain rescue are watching this. Everyone assumed I was on the helicopter and I was dead. There's no word that there were no fatalities at that point. So that was different, thinking that, that having people think he died. The big lessons from that, one is just challenge convention. The convention was everybody ropes up and climbs the mountain. If it's steep enough to climb a mountain and you need a rope, it's steep enough to touch that rope to the mountain. Set aside glacier travel. which is a little bit of a different deal. But, you know, there's a syndrome where we do things just because that's how we've always done it. Well, and in fact, you know, there's another saying I like, which is being an expert may only mean that you've gotten away with doing the wrong thing longer than anybody else. Okay, so you got to think about these things. People, and that's really seductive to new climbers. Because you're a brand new climber, that rope is safety, isn't it? And maybe not. And like they do not understand the systems that they are inserting themselves in the physics. And that's something that is incumbent upon us to explain to new people in new sports. You know, whether climbing, skiing, hiking, whatever, you need to explain all those kind of nuances to them. So I'm going to, how am I doing on time?
Wait a minute, that wasn't the most.
5 minutes left?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to jump forward. I'm going to skip this one. You have lunch with me, I'll tell you all about it. So let's see. And with 5 minutes, I'm just going to jump right into some themes here. So people ask me like, well, you know, how do I not need your service? Which is not totally complimentary, but I get it. I like simple models. And so the model that I go to is good judgment, good equipment, good experience. And this applies for any sport, right? Especially sports that can kill yourself. So if you took like, if you ever climbed anything? No? Okay, what's your name? Sean. So if I took Sean and I took her down to REI and I decked her out in all the latest, greatest, top-end climbing gear, pointed her up the mountains, oh there, she's probably going to get in an accident, no offense, because she doesn't know how to use it, right? Same thing, I could take the world's best climber, I could take Paige, and I could outfit her with crampons with the spikes we put on our boots, that are sharp as marbles because they're rentals and they're all worn down, and send her up on an icy day, and as good as Paige is, she's probably going to have an accident as well, right? So good equipment, good experience, and then the last one's good judgment, right? And the sad thing is, like, you can get experience and equipment, but judgment, like, that is something that plays into things at times. People sometimes ask, why do you rescue those idiots? And I will tell you, with 26 years of experience, they want, you know, they make Darwin jokes and whatnot. The fact of the matter is, like, I can only think of a couple missions where somebody made dumb mistake after dumb mistake after dumb mistake, got injured, got rescued, and still didn't get it, right? Like, only a couple. The vast majority of people are just like you and me, because Mother Nature is really unforgiving. And I swear, ask Paige, did you make mistakes when you were a beginner and like learn lessons?
All the time,
Yeah, everybody can go back and go, boy, that was not my best moment, right? And that's why mountain rescue exists, is because little mistakes have big consequences. I've talked about these kind of things, so I'm gonna just jump forward. Risk homeostasis I wanna call out real quick. So we talked about like the Reco reflectors, and you talked about the backpacks with the airbags for avalanche and whatnot. I don't have one of those backpacks, the airbags. She's right, they're proven that they can keep you buoyant in an avalanche so that they can save a life. One, they're expensive, but that's not why I don't have one. The reason why is this, risk homeostasis. We all have our own individual acceptable level of risk. I ride a motorcycle, some people would be like, you're freaking crazy, right? That's okay for me, that's not okay for you, that's fine, right? What risk homeostasis says is, if you implement a technology that makes things appear safer, people just increase the amount of risk they take. And we all see that when we go to the mountain, right? Because all the car accidents we see, what are they? Four-wheel drives, right? Because we see the guy with four-wheel drive flying 50 miles an hour, and then the person with the two-wheel drive is like,
Nothing can happen, I got four-wheel drive.
okay, exactly. So risk homeostasis, you know, when we've had big rescues, people cry out, why aren't climbers mandated to take beacons? Which is less of an issue these days because the technology's evolved. But we had one rescue, made international news and whatnot, and local representative created a law that everybody above 9,000 feet or 8,000 feet in the state was going to have to carry a beacon, which was like, one, ridiculous because ski resorts go above that, and there weren't enough beacons for that. There's a litany of reasons. But every search and rescue organization in the state was unanimously against that. And one of the reasons was risk homeostasis. The next 3 big rescues we had after that made all the news was for climbers that knowingly climbed into winter storms, and they either lacked the equipment or the knowledge to use that equipment, but when they got over their head, they called for a rescue. And I asked them, like, would you have climbed that if you didn't have a beacon? Well, no, that wouldn't have been safe. Like, so that is not making us safer. And so that's what you have to reflect upon when you're making your outdoor and your gear decisions is, and everybody's different. Like, I don't know that I trust myself in a rescue that I wouldn't cross that slope that I wouldn't normally cross just because I have an airbag on my back. A couple other things real quick. Somebody came up before here and talked about pay attention, and that's kind of this be here now. And Paige will tell you that, like the avalanche hazard when you set off in the morning is not the avalanche hazard at 1 in the afternoon. So you have to continually be evaluating things like rockfall, icefall, avalanche, tree wells, that sort of thing. Constantly ask what's up. If you ski with Paige, she's always probing the snow, like she's total scientist. What is she doing? She's constantly looking at, are there weak layers in there? What does that feel like? How deep is it? Is that a new slab? We're constantly playing with that. And then come up with your plan, whether it's skiing, backcountry skiing, whatever, but don't get attached to the plan such that you can't adjust. Set troop goals, so I talked a little bit about that, like with the guy with the avalanche. You're not having contractions, right? Okay, I just worried you had a contraction or something like so. Okay.
Oh,
So,
but
okay.
I have an ostomy that's really going
So, sorry. So, other tips. I'm going to go right here. Whoops. Surveyor's tape. Everybody knows surveyor's tape? That will save your life. Was it like $5 at Home Depot or something like that? So, we are out searching. We are looking for clues. I've never had this happen, but what if you took surveyor's tape, tore it into 1-foot sections, wrote your name in a Sharpie on it, stuck it in a Ziploc bag, and put it in your backpack? Is it going to take up any space? Is it going to weigh anything? Does it cost anything? But if you get in a search and rescue situation where you need rescue, you now have a great tool to attract us. If you become unconscious and we have to like go out in the woods and find you, I virtually have to step on you if you can't respond to my yelling, right? Like, that's a tiny little target. But if you're able to like create a big 100-foot circle with a bunch of streamers on it, and I knew that you had that because you told the people, hey, I'm going backpacking, and by the way, if I get lost, I've got streamers, this is the color, I have my name on it. Like, now I know something to look for. Your odds of being found have just skyrocketed. Same thing, like, you know, you see these television shows, Bear Grylls and whatnot, he makes this really cool, like, outdoor shelter with pine boughs. That's really like the hunting blind, you can't see it. We'll walk right by that. So put something outside for us to see. And the last thing, I swear, trash bags. So non-breathable shell, like a trash bag or a silicone impregnated nylon, doesn't weigh anything, doesn't cost anything. If you get stranded outside, you can cut off evaporative heat loss. Everybody knows you stick your hand in a plastic bag, it gets all warm and toasty. That can save your life. It can increase the warmth of whatever you're wearing by like 10, 20 degrees. So it doesn't weigh anything. I'm done. So.
In closing, January 5th, 2015, a day that shook the U.S. ski team to its core. U.S. ski team has always maintained a training facility in Solden, Austria. That's where they train early season. Solden's the first FIS race of the season. On this day, they had snow. So they weren't able to train, so they released the athletes to go free ski. In Europe, and unknown to those ski teamers, anything outside the groom runs is off-piste. 6 of them got caught in an avalanche. 2 of them perished. Bryce Askell and Ronnie Burlow. Not only did the parents realize, but the ski team realized they did not have proper training. They trained in gates, they trained technical, they trained speed, but they were totally unprepared for those ski conditions of that day. We did not have any avalanche training. Out of that came an organization called BRASS, the Bryce and Ronnie Athletic Snow Safety Foundation. They have created training material, avalanche safety, that the U.S. ski team is now using and is open for the public also. Another resource for you is brassavalanche.org. There are some amazing videos on that. And there is a Brass 101 video that everyone should watch because it depicts that accident that killed Ronnie and Bryce. But anyway, in closing, thank you again, Paige and Steve. Let's give them a big hand. Copy of your presentation?
I mean, I was
Or at
gonna
least the resources?
share the resource slide.
Okay, great, yeah. We will get the